Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the China Report on NewsX World. Now we start from US. Zohran Mamdani gains victory in the New York City mayoral race. The Democrat defeats Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa in a historic election with a record voter turnout. Mamdani makes history as New York City's first Muslim and youngest mayor in generations. Now for this discussion, we continue the news. Mamdani's victory comes in the face of fierce attacks on his policies and Muslim heritage from President Donald Trump, business elites, and the conservative media. The self-described socialist is a state lawmaker from New York's Queens borough. He appealed to voters by pledging to tackle the soaring cost of living, offering free city bus travel, childcare, and city-run grocery stores. Meanwhile, the crowd at Mamdani's watch party has erupted with cheers, hugs, and high fives on as Mamdani has been declared the winner in the highly watched mayoral race. Celebrating at the watch party were New York Attorney General Letitia James and New York Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now for this discussion, we welcome Quinton Hitchcock. He is an international affairs expert, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Quinton, for joining us at NewsX World. Thank you for joining us. Now, looking at this exciting news, who is Mamdani and what was most impactful to you about him or his campaign?
Well, he's certainly a mayor that we've never had before in the history of our country, I'll tell you that much. He is a democratic socialist. He has run probably one of the most impressive, one of the most successful campaigns that we've seen in modern American history. But I'll tell you right now, his election and his success means that the Democrat Party in the United States is at a turning point. And our politics from this day forward will never be the same again. So we'll wait to see just how much he works in a bipartisan manner when he actually takes the oath of office. But this is certainly an unprecedented night in American history, one that we have never seen before.
And, how do you see his open critics about President Trump and real estate agents or in his rhetoric in his latest winning speech?
Well, there's no question that he is certainly a divisive candidate. And I want this to be very clear. Just because he won, there's an extraordinary amount of people, both in and out of New York City, that imminently disagree with his politics and wanted nothing to do with him. He certainly has a lot of critics on both sides of the political aisle. So he may be popular with a certain wing of the Democrat Party, the socialists, the far left side of the party, but he is certainly not popular with conservatives, with independents, with moderate, center-left Democrats. So that'll make this even more interesting, and that's why I say that his election really, he becomes the face of the Democrat Party in many ways.
So what do you think, what does his election win suggests about the democratic socialist shifting political landscape within the Democratic Party or within New York?
Well, I think it's very simple. I think the center left no longer exists in American politics. I think Democrats are moving further and further to the left. Republicans, in some aspects, are moving further and further to the right. So what does that mean? That means that our politics are becoming polarizing. They're becoming much more divisive, a lot of hateful rhetoric spewed at either side. So in America, we're heading towards a very dangerous place in this country. I don't think in our country's history we have been this divisive, this divided rather, since the Civil War. in the 1800s. So we have we have a lot of reasons to be concerned about the health of our democracy. And I think there's a lot of blame on either side of the aisle, but there's no question that the Democrat Party, this is no longer the Democrat Party of 10, 20, 30 years ago. They are moving left, far left, and in a very quick hurry.
And how might this victory influence national democratic strategy ahead of future U.S. elections? How do you see it? Do you think it could encourage more left-wing candidates to run in major cities?
I think absolutely. I mean, we're seeing that. Not only are we going to see that in the future, we're seeing that tonight. Minneapolis, the state of California, Virginia, New Jersey, all had elections tonight where far left candidates, much further left than any other candidates that we have seen in the past, were on the ballot, and were successful. We're wildly successful. So yes, to answer your question, we're going to start seeing an influx of ultra liberal candidates that decide to run for office. And so that's gonna make our politics even much more divisive and certainly much more interesting for the years to come.
And Kinton, how do you see it? You mentioned earlier that U.S. is heading towards a very dangerous time as the progressive left is becoming more and more left. There's less ground for centrist left, and right wing is becoming more and more right. Do you think this progressive agendas on both sides, where do you think is headed?
Well, let me just give you a very short example. We all know the political activist Charlie Kirk that was murdered about 7, 8 weeks ago. Well, let me walk you through what happened. The tragedy happens. He gets assassinated, and we see rhetoric on social media, on television, on radio, on pop culture of people celebrating his death, people that are mocking his widow, his family members, his little children. This happened by thousands of people online. This has been well documented. And I just give you that as a small little example of where our politics are today, right? Charlie Kirk's big crime, well, he was a Republican. I don't even call him far right. He was a Republican that was outspoken on a number of different conservative issues. And because of that, most people in this country, certainly the people on the left, absolutely hated him and had nothing good to say about him. And to answer your question, that's where we're heading: is hate-filled rhetoric, violence, and just constant division in this country, online, in person. So America has to do some soul searching. And I think that Republicans, from a political standpoint, are going to have to look in the mirror, and they're going to have to decide the best course of action for the midterm elections next year. But as of right now, this is a very good night for Democrats, and a very, very bad night if you are not a Democrat socialist in this country.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Quinton Hitchcock for joining us as an international affairs expert from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for joining us. Now we move on to our next news, to Asia. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an order to lower fentanyl-related tariffs on Chinese products, formalizing a key part of his deal with Chinese leader Xi Jinping after their first face-to-face talks in years. Shortly after returning to the presidency this year, Trump has imposed additional tariffs of 20% on goods from China over its alleged role in the fentanyl supply chain. But China has since committed efforts to halting the flow of precursors used to make fentanyl into the United States after Trump and Xi's summit last month in Busan, South Korea. In turn, Washington has pledged that it would cut its additional tariffs on Chinese imports from 20% to 10%, starting from November 10th. Now for this discussion, we welcome Gerald Alfiel. He's an economist, joins us live from Dubai. Thank you very much, Gerald, for joining us again. Good to see you. Gerald, looking at this news and Trump and Xi's latest meeting, how do you analyze their relationship now and also the relationship of China and US?
Good morning. Yes, it's about easing tensions. I'm taking the heat from the room in relation to tariffs and tit for tat in relation to global trade, because this affects global trade. And President Trump has received more and more critics from businessmen and women, but also from his own party. Mike Pompeo, for example, was here in Dubai a couple of weeks ago, criticized the Trump tariffs. He said they hurt the US economy. And now they move forward. And I think the whole fentanyl discussion also and the whole issue is a bit a relic from the pandemic when it started, or when the finger pointing started on China. Now, the relation, going back to your question, is it's about finding common grounds, easing tensions, because also I was in China this summer, and definitely the domestic economy needs an upgrade, needs a boost. And both sides see now that the whole tariff tit for tat is hurting both economies.
And does Trump's decision to lower tariffs on Chinese goods signal do you think it signals a genuine improvement in their relations, or do you think it's just a temporary strategic move?
The question is difficult to answer because, as you indicate with your question, is that we saw in the past Trump has moved one step forward, but then two steps back. And officially, it shows a change of tone. Officially, it shows, informally, it shows a temporary change of tone, because they said we do this for a year and it's taking the heat off the room. But where the discussion was before with the other interlocutor about Mamdani, I think President Trump has now to look also on the domestic political issues, not only in relation to rise of Democrat socialists, but also in relation to the pressure on stock markets. Stock markets came under pressure. Also, crypto Bitcoin is now plummeting to $102 per coin. President Trump and his administration, also his family as a business party, is heavily promoting crypto and Web3 and digital assets. So I think he can now leave the foreign policy issues a bit aside, especially with China, and focus on domestic issues.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Gerald Field for sharing that insight as an economist. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on, China unveils a new initiative to boost imports, positioning itself as a supersized market amid growing trade tensions with the United States. Commerce Minister Wang Wentao has announced the Big Market for All Export for China program, which will host 10 major trade events each year, featuring 5 to 6 countries. The goal is to make China the world's top export destination and strengthen global cooperation. Premier Li Qiang attended the launch in Shanghai ahead of the China International Import Expo, which starts today from November 5th to 10th. The initiative comes as China faces criticism that its import growth lags far behind its surging exports, fueling global trade imbalances. Despite efforts to showcase openness, the European Chamber of Commerce has called the expo more political than practical. Now we go back to welcoming Gerald Field. He's an economist, joins us live from Dubai. Thank you very much, Gerald, for staying with us. Looking at this, to what extent can trade expos like these and large-scale import programs offset concerns about China's limited market access and protectionist policies, as EU has also criticized it as more political than practical?
If there's one thing China is good at in relation to global trade, then it's about organizing events. China has the venues, China has the capacities to link and to invite people quickly. I attended many events in China and also conference. I organized a conference myself in Xiamen last year in the Fujian province. It was about precious metals, and we could recruit a lot of delegates and participants. So China has the venues, China has the will, China has the connections, and the EU criticism, I think, is because the EU knows that China is good at these things. And another point also pro-China in this regard is that China just added Sweden to its visa-free scheme. That makes 48 countries which can travel, whose citizens can travel visa-free to China. And there are big countries, not only emerging markets, but also Japan, Korea, South Korea, Australia, Russia, France, Spain, Switzerland, my country, Germany. Visa-free travel is a very pretty fair persuader for business people to come and to do trade, and you just go into China like you change your living room. That wasn't possible before the pandemic, where the visa process was quite complicated and bureaucratic. So China is good at organizing conferences and events. They help, definitely. They connect, and they help also people to connect with each other, and also those who haven't been to China, and there are still many people who haven't been to China from the aforementioned countries, can see China on the ground. China needs, for example, support in relation to infrastructure upgrade, in technology. China is a leader, of course, in robotics and AI, but doesn't mean that there's also room for cooperation and there are common grounds to join hands. China thinks win-win. This kind of tit for tat and this kind of arm wrestling is not on China's mind, as I can say from 20 years of experience working with Chinese companies.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Gerald Field for sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we're moving on. Taiwan's Foreign Minister chia-lung has stated that China has added a lot of conditions to its attendance at next year's APEC summit in the Chinese city of Shenzhen, and has gone back on a commitment to allow equal participation. The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation is one of the only international bodies that Chinese claimed Taiwan is a member of, and next November's summit will come as relations between Taiwan and China have plummeted amid a stepped-up Chinese military pressure campaign against the island. Taiwan has said that it has been promised by China last year the right to equal participation, and that the safety of its people attending would be guaranteed. Meanwhile, China's foreign ministry has stated that Taiwan's participation in APEC activities must comply with the One China principle, which Beijing views as meaning both sides of the Taiwan Strait belong to one country, something Taiwan's government rejects. Now we move on to our next news. According to the Civil Defense Office of Philippines, Typhoon Kalmaegi leaves at least 66 people dead. The storm, locally known as Tino, has battered major cities with powerful winds and devastating floods. Cebu province is the worst hit, with 49 fatalities reported. Videos show residents stranded on rooftops and vehicles swept away by raging waters. A military helicopter deployed for rescue operations crashed in Mindanao, killing all 6 crew members on board. Officials say rescue teams are struggling to reach affected areas as debris and floodwaters block roads. Winds of over 80 miles per hour continue to lash parts of the Visayas region, though the typhoon is now weakening as it moves towards the South China Sea. Cebu's governor has declared state of calamity, calling the flooding unprecedented. Relief operations are underway, but officials warn that the full scale of destruction is still emerging. And that's a wrap on the China Report. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.